But anyway, when avoiding suffering doesn't work as Catholics, we like to numb our feelings or deny it or fake getting over it. That's one of my favorites. We're like, oh yeah, this terrible thing happened, but look at me, I'm better. And you get a shirt that says, I chose happy, and and you write a book. But as a Catholic who suffers, I've noticed a few things, and let me know if you can relate to them. You're suffering, something's bothering you. And I wish that I could figure out another word for suffering that lets you guys know that suffering doesn't have to be like, you broke your leg, or you had a death in your family, which both are very serious, obviously, but I'm guaranteed that many of you have had different sufferings in your life that aren't that, right? So anyway, you're suffering, and the first thing someone asks you is, have you been praying enough? Or they say, oh, you're suffering, here's a novena card. And I'm not saying that praying shouldn't be your first resort. It should, trust me. But at that point, you can feel judged, right? Like, oh my gosh, well, since I'm suffering, that must mean that I don't have a good relationship with Jesus, which must mean my prayers aren't working, which must mean I'm not praying right. Why am I Catholic? I should just go suffer elsewhere, right? Well, maybe you're not thinking that, but that's what I thought. But you feel like your prayers aren't good enough, and you feel self-conscious for suffering. And on social media, which I work a lot on social media, and remember, what was our goal after this talk? There you go. So on social media, I feel even more guilty of suffering when I see people going through the same things as me and being fine. And this game, overall, is what I like to call mission outcast with each other. Like, who can be the best Catholic sufferer? Like, who can suffer in the best way? Like, they suffer, and then they tell everybody, look, I suffered, and this is what I learned from it, like a day later, and it becomes, again, a source of fake suffering, okay? And a lot of these problems are not just specific to Catholics, but I see it in the Catholic social media world. And here's my truth. Jesus speaks to us in different ways. He made us for different purposes. He knows every tear we shed, which I don't know about you, but has anybody ever kind of started crying and then you're like, I haven't cried in a while, I might as well just go all out. You go and look in front of the mirror and you're like, I'm crying about this, and then you can't stop, so you start thinking of other reasons why you should be crying too, and then the next day you're like, wow, I'm over everything I've ever done. Like, look, I just suffered from what happened in middle school. Like, that boy was so mean. But you're like, oh, well, God counted them all, and, see you in another month, mirror. Like, it's one of those things that you have to do more than just once a month. Let me tell you. So, I don't know about you, but the last time I checked, Jesus wasn't a genie or a slot machine. And Jesus gave us each other because to be his hands, his feet, his heart here on earth. So be authentic with your suffering, but don't expect a pity. Don't expect to land a book deal. And don't expect to be recognized for your suffering, because a lot of your suffering will go unnoticed, but it's all about what you do with that suffering, regardless of what happens with it. So it's not bad to suffer, but it's about what we do with it. So really quick, I want to mention what offering it up means. And this is another thing that goes along with suffering as a Catholic. When people say, well, offer it up. And I remember coming back to the church and I encountered something uncomfortable and someone said, you know what, Caroline, offer it up. I'm like, okay, I'll go do that. And then offer it up. Oh no, just offer it up. I had no idea what that meant. So I never got it. Okay, so if you're like me and you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say offer it up, here's what I've come to believe it looks like. So you're embracing some sort of pain or discomfort for this, and then you say, well, I'm going to embrace this for the sake of someone who needs a little extra grace right now. So you say, Lord, I offer blank for the sake of blank. It can be anything, whether, Lord, I offer the fact that I'm super cold because the blizzard's coming for the sake of the unborn. And I know that sounds silly, but even if you offer the littlest sufferings for the holy souls in purgatory, for a friend that's sick, offering it up, that's what it looks like. So, and of course, it's a very small version of Jesus offering himself up for us on the cross. Now, I didn't know exactly where to put this next quote, but it's by St. Teresa of Avila. And she says, One must not think that a person who is suffering is not praying. He is offering up his sufferings to God, and many a time he is praying much more truly than one who goes away by himself and meditates his head off, and if he squeezed out a few tears, think he is praying. That was pretty good. That's another mic drop moment. So before I end, I have a couple more things, but something I want to refer back to is my little litany I started off with. Now, the worst feeling I've ever felt is feeling alone. It's what I like to call spiritual poverty. Mother Teresa mentions it too. And it makes you feel isolated, dwell in your pity, and it can make it hard when you're trying to embrace your cross, right? Simon helped Jesus. Just remember that. Simon helped Jesus. You need a Simon, and oftentimes you need to be the Simon in someone else's life. Now, if you follow me on Be Still or on Church Pop, you know about my Saint Squad. Okay, but if you're unaware, let me fill you in. So, are you guys old enough to remember MySpace Top 8? No. What about Snapchat streaks? Yeah, Snapchat streaks, okay. Well, I just want to let you guys know that I had no idea what a Snapchat streak was, and so when someone would say, streak, I'd be like, oh, that's weird. So, this essentially is your heavenly speed dial. Your messengers, okay? Holy men and women who suffered like you suffer. They understand your heartaches, anxieties, yet they achieved sainthood. And no, they're not Martians, okay? They didn't do it perfectly all the time. But they embraced their crosses and tried to strive for holiness in the best way they could in that moment. So, here's I've given you guys a lot of assignments, but here's another one. Create a personal litany of saints. I personally have 10. I would probably have more if I had more fingers to track who I'm praying to in that moment. But pick saints that maybe their story aligns with yours. Maybe it's your confirmation saint. It's always a good idea to have them on there. Maybe it's someone you're named after. Maybe it's someone who's a patron of your cause. I have St. Maximilian Kolbe. Not only is he super cool, but he's a patron saint of those recovered from addiction. So it's like win-win. So he's on my saint squad. Joseph, I gave you guys my saint squad earlier. So essentially, you guys can have mine too if you want. They're pretty reliable. So what if I ended by saying that Satan doesn't want you to suffer? Would I blow your mind? Well, in this book, Answers Not Promises by Mother Angelica, she has, and this is E.W. Chan's very own Mother Angelica, and I did not bring this book just because this lovely nun started the company in which I work for, but because she changed my life. And I'm glad that E.W. Chan introduced me to her, but you gotta read this book. It's called Answers Not Promises, okay? And she has an entire chapter on suffering, and a lot of her words change my perspective on how I look at things. But this, she illustrates how it's not the fact that we suffer, but it's about what we do with our suffering. And this is why Satan doesn't want us as Catholics to suffer. There is nothing that pleases Satan more than to see all of God's children confused and resentful about the suffering in their lives. Satan doesn't want you to gain grace and transformation from suffering. He wants you to rebel against God in defeat, to give up, and to throw away your potential for holiness. But you've got a choice. With every bit of suffering that comes your way, you've got 2 ways to go. You can play into the hands of Satan and become hateful and bitter in your suffering, or you can grow holy and Christ-like. That's just a sneak peek. So read this book, changed my life, and as it just illustrated, you have a beautiful chance in your sufferings, big or small. I guarantee every single person in this room has a cross or multiple crosses to bear. One of mine is addiction, one of mine is depression, and these two things, they seep into my life, and it's kind of an alarm that once these two crosses become a little heavier, it inspires me to move. Maybe I need to pray a little more. Maybe I need to offer it up a little more. A lot of times our sufferings involved with these crosses that we're given inspire us to act. And I know that this analogy is kind of weird, but I'm just going to say it. I imagine when God creates us, okay, like an assembly line of cute little babies just going down. And he's just lovingly giving us these crosses, and he's like, hope to talk to you soon, you know? Each of us, find your cross, and if you don't have one, that's great, but someday you'll find yourself with that cross. So, some last things I want to share is if you're suffering in any way, it's a sign that God wants to grow closer to you. He communicates something unique in every bit of suffering, as I just said. So don't waste that opportunity. Don't say, I don't want to suffer anymore, and go do something drastic, like I used to, / sometimes still do if I'm not staying on track. But nothing will amount to those times in my life when I was actively trying to turn away from every bit of suffering and to, as Mother Angelica said, make the wrong choice in saying, I would rather choose temporary happiness, choose the world over suffering like Christ did. Sometimes it takes a long time to find the message in your mess. Something on Be Still I share a lot about is that I have a lot of messes in the past, currently, and the time it takes me to look into these situations and find the God moments, like cultivating a general sense of joy or trying my hardest to do so. Finding the messages in these little messes in my life helps me to stay in the present moment and to not run away from it. To know that the longer I spend addressing the situation, the more opportunities I have to grow through it. Because you grow through what you go through. But don't rush into trying to get yourself into any crazy situation where you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll learn from this. Just be patient, because trust me, you will have suffering come your way. I mean, high school's hard. I cannot imagine a time in the life where you don't even know what a MySpace Top 8 is, and people are asking you to streak and, on Snapchat. It's hard. But hopefully my talk today can kind of alleviate any of that pressure you feel, any of that pressure you have to get through all of it by yourself. And hopefully it also helps you to be merciful towards others. To when you encounter the sufferings of others, you don't fail to help them embrace that, because it can be uncomfortable. My boyfriend always says it's really uncomfortable when I start crying and he doesn't know what to do. But what he's learned, maybe it's through my example, because, he hasn't cried on my shoulder yet, but when he does, I'll help him through it. But if someone comes to you, know that you're called to be God's hands, be his heart. So it's not only important how you embrace your sufferings, but how you help others embrace theirs. So I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. Make new friends. Look again to your right and your left. Think of the root canal analogy. Go make your litanies and pray for me, because I'll be praying for you.